If you have topics you would like to have us discuss on the Aging Well podcast, please click on the links in the episode description to send us a text or record your message or comments. We'd love to hear from you and how we can help you age well. If you benefit from the Aging Well podcast and would like to support the content financially, please click on the Support the Show link or support our affiliates and advertisers. Welcome to the Aging Well podcast. I'm Jeff Armstrong here with Corbin Bruton. In this and the episodes that follow, we will share candid discussions on aging and hear from the experts. We are here to inform and encourage as we experience, aging. Is all you need for an effective workout a 10-pound dumbbell or even a pair of heavier dumbbells? In this episode, Dr. Armstrong and Corbin Bruton discuss 3 articles from livingstrong.com that suggest exercises to do with a 5 or 10-pound dumbbell, and how the principles of specificity and progressive overload apply to using these specific exercises and dumbbells to meet your fitness needs and goals. All right, so Corbin,
yes, sir.
When we started this podcast, we had a lot of discussion about what we were going to do with it, and before it really evolved into the Aging Well podcast, we'd considered looking at, and I think it's still kind of part of this whole concept of the podcast, to do some critiques of fitness products, fitness workouts, and things like that. We haven't really done much of that, but this past week I came across a couple articles actually on livestrong.com that really just kind of got under my skin, and I thought, that's a pretty good topic for a podcast today. And the one that really started it was one that's called "All You Need for an Effective Workout is a 10-Pound Weight."
Ah.
What do you think about talking a little bit about that to kind of educate our listeners a bit about, is that really the case?
Personally, if you're going to be starting your journey and you're working up to 10 pounds and you can't lift it, then get up to that range. But in reality, I mean, for me, I used to tell my clients this all the time. When they were like, I don't want to lift too heavy. And it's like, well, can you at least lift a gallon of milk? Because roughly 10 pounds is that gallon of milk. And then on top of that, if you really want to see results, that progressive overload is the way to go. And it's okay to lift heavier than just 10 pounds.
Yeah. And I've seen so many people that kind of get into that one set of dumbbells and that's all they kind of do. And the premise of this whole article is kind of bizarre, that all you need is an effect for the effective workout is 10 pounds, and they give you, a workout. And they actually, if you kind of scroll through whether it's considered a blog or the series of articles, they actually have an article sandwiched in the middle of another one, best exercises to do with 5-pound dumbbells. And then you have kind of the lead article on this. So 9 best exercises to do with the 10-pound dumbbells. There's a lot to really kind of unwrap there. So where should we start? What do you say we start kind of with the exercises that they detail in the article?
Yeah, no, sounds good. Are we starting off with the one that says all you need for an effective workout is a 10-pound weight, or are we diving right into the 9? Because it looks like they're split up into
which is another thing I love about a lot of these fitness articles. If you look, the exercises are actually a little bit different, and it's like, I get so many of these articles, the best exercises you need to do. And, we always kind of settle back on our basic 5 or the basic 6, however you label it, if you include carries. And there's basic movement patterns. We've talked about there being seven basic movement patterns. And so whenever you evaluate a whole body workout, are you hitting those movement patterns? Are you hitting the squat type of movement? Are you hitting the hip hinge? Are you hitting a horizontal press, vertical press, and then somewhere in between with that, a horizontal row or pull and a vertical pull? And then as well, carries or something kind of that are activating the stabilizer muscles in the core. And so those are critical. And so as we look at this, let's just kind of go through each exercise. It starts with move 1 is the single leg deadlift.
It's a hinge.
Yeah, it's a hinge. Single leg deadlift, is it really kind of a deadlift, or is it really just a bit more of a single leg Romanian deadlift. There's some variations within that, but I'd say overall that's probably a pretty good exercise to do. Although, again, as we talk about, limiting that to a 10-pound dumbbell is kind of short-sighted.
I think 10 pounds to start off, just so you can get the movement down, because it wouldn't really make sense to get start really heavy and just throw off your form altogether.
Yeah, I mean,
right? So
the idea is, and this whole concept of a specific weight dumbbell is completely ridiculous to me because everybody is different. Everybody's going to have a different starting point, a different capacity. And, it might be a 5-pound dumbbell for somebody.
Right.
A very aged adult might only be able to do a 5-pound dumbbell. But again, the goal is going to be to progress that. So it might be able to do more. 25-pound dumbbell, 50-pound dumbbell, might be able to do it with the 45-pound bar. So the idea is start with a weight that is going to be appropriate for you. The second movement is a single arm hammer curl to overhead press. Now, an exercise like that, to me, it really comes down to, what are we talking about? Are we talking about building strength, or are we talking about leaning more toward the cardio side of all this, where it's muscle endurance, doing more of a HIIT workout or HIIRT workout, high intensity interval resistance training workout, or are we looking at a strengthening workout? Now, if you're looking at actually building overall strength in a body, that's not going to be an ideal exercise because your deltoid muscles are going to be different in terms of their strength than the bicep muscle.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're not necessarily properly loading both muscles in doing that particular action. But for a high intensity interval type of workout, yeah, it's probably pretty decent movement. What do you think?
I think these for a HIIT training, we actually used to really incorporate this in the classes that I was taking, but are teaching. But again, that was an interval of 40 seconds on, 20 seconds off, and we were trying to get as many reps in as we could with as much focus on form and technique, because eventually, you do 12 exercises, 40 seconds on, 20 seconds off, and you do 3 rounds of those 12 different exercises. Come round 3, you're going to be that fatigue is going to set in. And so having a weight that is manageable, that you can focus on form and technique is good. But I do agree with you if, there is a huge difference between your bicep strength and your deltoid strength. And if you're primarily trying to focus on building overall strength, or you've listened to our past podcasts and you're like, man, I really want to try a 5x5 program, then keeping the exact same weight and curling into a vertical press, that's not going to be ideal. Just sticking with that vertical press and press.
And I'm not sure if we've defined over one of the other podcasts the difference between muscle strength and muscle endurance. Again, remember, if we talk about the health-related components of physical fitness, it's cardiorespiratory endurance, muscle strength, flexibility, and body composition. And there's a bit of a continuum as we run from pure cardiorespiratory to pure strength. And pure strength is the ability to really lift a maximal amount of weight. It's measured as the 1 repetition maximum. It's how much weight you can lift one time only. Whereas muscle endurance is more your ability to sustain a contraction or to perform repeated contractions. And so many of these exercises are not really building strength per se. They're building more of a muscle endurance. They're pretty good for burning fat, getting the body a little bit stronger throughout the full ranges of motion, but it's going to be limited in terms of where you're progressing to. Movement 3 is the dumbbell squat. No real issues with that one. I think there are numerous variations of the squat that can have differing benefits depending on kind of where you're placing the weight. Nice thing with a dumbbell squat is that you're learning to perform a proper squat movement without excessive compression on the vertebrae. So for an older person, that might actually be a very good exercise to do. Any thoughts on that?
Well, again, I think it comes down to that progressive overload. So I think if you want to stick in that 10-pound range and focus on form, technique, balance, and stability for that dumbbell squat, or if it's a single dumbbell squat, and you're kind of doing more of like a briefcase squat where you have it on one side but no weight on the other. Yeah, just to get the hang of it. But again, I'm a huge advocate for increasing weight over time. Like if 10 pounds is too light, it's okay to move up. It's okay to appreciate your strength.
I discussed my epigenetics test with True Diagnostic co-founder Hannah Wendt in episode 162. Epigenetic testing measures baseline and changes in your pace of aging, giving you the power to steer your anti-aging or health and wellness journey in the right direction. I learned that I am aging well. Click on the affiliate link in the episode description, use the promo code AGEWELL, and receive a 12% discount on your epigenetics test and monitor your pace of aging. So exercise that gets a thumbs up. We'll talk more about the whole idea of progression a bit more. The next one is called a single arm face pull. I am not a fan of this exercise. It's not bad for maybe some rear delt work or something like that. But what I call a face pull is quite a bit different and really requires the use of cables and, again, progressive overload to be able to adequately stimulate the external rotators of the shoulder as well as the trapezius muscles. And this is really the way they're performing it is more of a rear delt exercise. Not a bad exercise. I just don't like the name. What do you think?
Well, I mean, it kind of is a modified version of a rowing movement with our 5x5, but I mean, how they're describing to do it, you're right. It's not really focusing so much on the back, but more of the delts and traps on that one. And I don't really see, it's kind of like a single arm zipper pull, I guess. And it's just, I don't know. I kind of disagree with that one.
Yeah, I don't like that one. And then we got the wood chop, which is okay. But again, that is not a strengthening exercise. Got a little bit of core action to it, but much better ways to perform that. But again, for a HIIT type workout, it's probably okay. What do you think?
I actually think wood chops are great if you're going in with a full rotation. I think especially if you're in kind of like a sporting world and you need to have your whole lat or hips or everything getting that full rotation, I think that would be great. But I think if you're just, I'm just on my journey right now and I just want to maintain my strength. Well, that's up for discussion. But yeah, I think if you're wanting,
I don't lump that in with a strength exercise. Definitely muscle endurance. Definitely has some good benefits for the core. And I think, maybe at some point we'll break down the core exercises a little bit more. But that's the 9 exercises. So
that wasn't even 9 though. That's what's crazy. That was only 5.
How did I? Well, maybe I'm missing some. Okay, yes, you're right.
Because then it drops into the 9 best exercises.
Where maybe I'm scrolling on this article, but it only lists 5. What?
Mm-hmm. And then it drops into the 9, and starting off on those 9 is renegade rows.
I guess it is only 5 movements. It's all you need for an effective workout is 10-pound dumbbells and the exercises. So let's go back up then to the 9 exercises. Yeah, so the renegade row, which is essentially you're kind of in a plank position with the dumbbell resting on it, both dumbbells resting on the ground, kind of in a push-up position. And then you row one of those dumbbells up and get a bit more kind of trunk rotation involved in that exercise. Thoughts on the renegade row?
Thoughts on the renegade row. Okay. If you are doing a HIIT style, or if you're doing muscle endurance, or if you're trying to build overall stamina, then yes, I think that a renegade row is great. I do think it's a little bit advanced for probably most of our listeners. And if one of those listeners are in the elderly community, well, it's a combination of holding a push-up plank and then taking dumbbells and rowing it up. So it is a combination of that rowing movement as well as holding what would you say, an isometric push position?
Yeah, I guess it'd be considered isometric. It's not, I mean, it's basically going to be held in position by the stability of the bone joint. So not really necessarily a muscle contraction from my point of view.
Again, if it kind of depends on what your goals are. If you're trying to build stamina, if you're trying to build endurance, if you're looking to cut, this might be something that you want to throw in. But if you're looking for overall strength, no.
Yeah, you're not going to be able to overload that quite enough as you would maybe a more standard dumbbell row. And we got the next one is squat to overhead press.
100% on board with this.
You're 100% on board with that?
Yep.
Again, for HIIT exercise, I'd be on board for it. But for strengthening exercise, a little less so. It depends really, where's your focus in what your strength that you're building. That is not going to overload the quadriceps, the hamstrings, and the glutes as much as a more heavily loaded squat would do. And especially if you're able to go from that squat position and then press the dumbbells overhead, your shoulders are much smaller and far less as strong as your lower extremity is. So I would think, again, that's a good HIIT type workout. It may be something good to supplement your normal strengthening exercises in the legs to maybe get a little bit more explosive power, which explosive power at any age is not necessarily a bad thing. I think it is something that even the most senior of our listeners might consider, as well as, younger athletes. But I always look at that as being something that follows a strengthening program, as we do what would be considered more of a vertical integration, where you build strength and hypertrophy, and then you're progressively working toward more power, acceleration, speed, those types of things. From an athletic standpoint, you need to be doing the strength first and then those.
See, I think this is a combination of both of them. Because
you can't combine both. I mean, remember, it's specificity of training. So I'll argue till I'm blue in the face in regards to anybody that says, well, yeah, it's both strength and power. No, because they're two separate components. You're changing the dynamics of what the muscle is doing a little bit. Not that it's not a bad exercise. You just have to consider, what is the goal in doing this?
I think the goal in this is to shock the body. I think the goal in this particular one would to get your heart rate up.
Okay, well, that's, again, not strength.
Well, hold on, I'm getting there. And then on top of that, if you're using a weight where you can, if you're at that standing position and you can barely push the weight up, well, once you drop down into the squat and as you're coming up, you're using the momentum of the upward motion to get it up above your head. Again, still focusing on form, still focusing on technique, still focusing on controlling that weight and having full control of that movement. Well, it's creating that mind-body connection, which in return is going to help you with your strength training program by grabbing because you're becoming so aware of your body's movement.
Okay.
That would be
So that would be more of a neuromotor skill related component of fitness. Not necessarily strength.
Well,
and again, you're limited though by your shoulder strength. And if you are using the squat to build the momentum to throw that weight up, again, you're taking away from the shoulder's capacity to be lifting that. And if you're only using a 10-pound dumbbell, then either, you're
I
better off
forgot we're only doing 10 pounds. Oh man. Okay.
It's a little bit different. If you were doing what, for an athlete might be considered a bit more of a squat to a push press, that's a little bit different. You're trying to develop that full body explosiveness out of the bottom. So I'd say this exercise is a good exercise if done for the right purposes and in the right way.
Yes, I forgot that we're just talking about 10 pounds for a second.
And then the next one is the single leg deadlift. Love the single leg deadlift. Really, I would consider this not a deadlift, but a single leg RDL, Romanian deadlift. But I guess they maybe just shortened it so that no credit to the Romanians, and it's just a little bit easier on the tongue. But It's definitely a single leg Romanian deadlift, because as you look at the image of it in the description of what you're doing, you're basically just doing a single leg hip hinge. You're not involving the knee flexion and extension quite as you would with a deadlift. Great exercise, very difficult to do. So a 10-pound might be a very good starting point there. It's a lot of coordination. I find the weight in doing RDLs initially is much more helpful in controlling the form. So doing it with some level of weight is going to be important, but eventually you're going to want to progress those in weight as well. Any thoughts on the single leg deadlift or
no? Because I think
RDL?
we talked about that on the very first exercise that they discussed. So not much we can.
Reverse lunge with rotation is number 4.
So I'm actually for this, and this is one of the lunges that we would incorporate in the HIIT training classes that I would teach. But again, for that particular thing, that wasn't a class that was primarily focused on strength training, but instead like muscle endurance. With this one, I think a 10-pound weight is actually, it could be depending on where you're at in your fitness level. It actually might be too heavy, that 10-pound range. And again, this is going to be based off of your body, because when you're in a full lunge position, that 10 pounds, not that bad. As soon as you're taking your upper body and you're rotating it all the way as far as you can towards that knee that's out forward, it kind of throws everything off, because now you got a whole balance game into it.
Yeah, I'd say that's probably minimal from the standpoint of, if your body was simply 10 pounds heavier, you'd be rotating the same.
Mm-hmm.
Anytime you're moving a weight horizontally, it's not really contributing to muscular contraction, other than in this case, it's maybe a little bit similar to kind of a carry where, your center of gravity is a little bit more shifted forward. And so as you rotate, there's a little bit more change in that center of gravity that might give you a little bit of kind of pull in one direction as you're rotating. But again, with 10 pounds, I don't think that is significant. I think what might be a better exercise than this, if you're really looking at core strength and maybe getting at leg strength, is doing it with in a more anti-rotational type of capacity, like doing a Pallof press, but doing a Pallof press where you drop down into that reverse lunge and then you're pressing the weight forward. And so you have that anti-rotational component rather than moving a weight horizontally against really no resistance. If that makes any sense. It's a little bit of kind of biomechanics and physics in there that, anytime you are moving a weight, the weight needs to be moving in the direction opposite of gravity in order for it to really be effective.
Yeah, but I feel like that would be a different type of core, because I feel like with the twist, you're focusing on the obliques, and then with the press out, you're focusing on the rectus abdominis on that one. No?
No. Pallof press is much more specifically an anti-rotational type of exercise. You get a little bit of, you're having a little bit of anti-extension, anti-flexion in that as well, but it's primarily the rotation. And this would be the same thing. You're getting a little bit of anti-flexion by putting the weight in front of you, because now your extensor muscles have to contract a little bit more to keep your body from leaning forward in the lunge. But I just think it's minimal. This is a great exercise, again, for HIIT, and with a HIIT workout, I can understand using a singular weight dumbbell just so that you can move from, transition from exercise to exercise. But we got to remember that type of a workout is not going to be a strengthening workout. It is moving much more into the cardio realm as opposed to the strength and muscle endurance realm.
I actually used 2 weights when I was teaching my HIIT classes, and it was not 10 pounds. I was using it with 25s or 30s, but in each hand, instead of having one single weight, I would take the 2 and press them together and then do that twisting motion. But that's throwing a whole nother.
The this is 10-pound dumbbells. So some of these exercises, like the next exercise is a transverse lunge.
No.
I'm not a huge fan of the transverse lunge because I just find you're limited in your range of motion just simply because of the dynamics of the movement. But it can have some good effects for the adduction muscles and things like that. But I would leave that for a HIIT workout. What do you think?
I would say based off of this photo, go deeper into the lunge and like maybe do a Spider-Man lunge where you're even deeper into it and that other leg is fully extended. But I mean, just based off the description in the article as well as the photo that's given, I don't even think she's really lunging. I think she's just kind of like leaning to the side and
not a very good photo. The next exercise is the tricep kickback. I am not a fan of the tricep kickback for many reasons. One, it puts excessive load on the shoulder. That shoulder strength stability tends to really limit the capacity of the triceps muscles to be able to be contracted fully. Most people do not do this exercise quite so effectively. Again, in a HIIT workout with a light weight, it's probably not going to be such a big deal. But again, if you can do a triceps kickback with a 10-pound dumbbell and you're doing all these other exercises with the 10-pound dumbbell, somewhere in there you're underloading the muscles. 10-pound could be an overload for an excessive load, I should say, not an overload, because we want overload to strengthen the muscles. But the kickback, there's better ways of hitting the tricep muscles. And, from a strengthening standpoint, I'd rather do tricep pushdowns with a cable as opposed to tricep kickbacks. Also find that it's very hard to get a full extension with a reasonable weight because gravity is really working against you. And that last little bit, leverage-wise, it gets a little bit hard to get a full contraction. Cables can hit it a lot more effectively. And there are other probably better tricep exercises as well. What are your thoughts?
I actually don't like tricep kickbacks. I think if you're doing like a HIIT training, I actually think it's a good rest exercise to put in there so you can kind of catch your breath, but you're still actively moving. But if you want to focus on your triceps, especially in that 10-pound range, I think a tricep overhead extension or like you said, a cable pull down with the triceps or even dips might be a better option. But again, it all depends on your fitness level. I know, especially in the demographic of elderly ladies, they're always saying like, what can I do to tone my triceps? Well, there are several other options. But yeah, me personally, I'm not a fan of tricep kickbacks.
Okay. So you agree on that one.
Yeah.
Next one's the hammer curl, which I like the hammer curl. I mean, it's full range of motion bicep exercise, good for both strength and muscle endurance, depending on how many reps and what kind of weight you're using. So thoughts on hammer curl?
I think 10 pounds is a good start on hammer curls. I also think that it is a good way if you want to just primarily get that mind muscle connection and really, really focus without like throwing your whole body into it. You don't want to go too heavy. You really want to go into it. But again, if you're in that range where you're easily doing 3 sets of 12 or 4 sets of 12 or whatever, then it's okay to move up in that weight.
And 10 pounds might be heavy for a lot of people.
And it might be.
A lot of people go way too heavy on their curls thinking that they're doing more. But I think given this workout and given some of the population that's maybe directed toward, 10 pounds might be even a little heavy for those hammer curls because you want to really get that good mind-muscle connection, really be concentrating on the supination of the arm as you're curling it up. And, you do those slow and controlled, even with a lighter weight, you can get a pretty decent workout out of it. So I think great exercise. We're going to be talking a bit more about this whole concept of just using a 10-pound dumbbell.
And 10 pounds could, honestly, that could be the perfect range for a lot of listeners
Yeah.
out there that are doing that bicep curl. And if you're doing a bicep curl and you're starting to feel it in your chest, or you're feeling it in your rotator cuffs in your back because you're trying to like stabilize yourself, well, drop that weight down a bit. And that's okay too, because again, focusing on good form and technique should be your number one goal, and then increasing that weight over time.
Yeah. And then we go to number 8 is the squat to overhead raise. I think as I kind of judge what they're going after here, it's attempting a little bit more of what might be more of a close grip snatch kind of lift. Again, I have real difficulty with an exercise that is involving or intended to involve the leg muscles and is limited by the strength of your shoulders. And an overhead raise, so it's essentially a front raise is what they're doing, is really limited to the strength of your anterior deltoid muscles. You're not going to be able to do a lot of weight. 10 pounds for some may be just right for those front raises, but you're not getting a whole heck of a lot of work on the squat.
Well, I don't know. I kind of disagree. Well, I mean, only because if you hop into the description, unlike that other one that we were talking about, where it was going in from an absolute squat position and then keeping the weight tight to the body and pressing it up. This one, as you squat down, your arms are fully extended towards the ground. And as you raise up, your elbows are kind of extended out, and that weight is fully extended. And then it's being kind of like rotated up above your head, which 10 pounds, that might be a little too much for this.
For the shoulders, but it's doing squat for the squats.
Oh no, for the squat, it's not going to be enough.
So you're better off really just doing a dumbbell front raise. And again, I see where they're trying to get more body action in there. And again, from the HIIT standpoint, where we're just looking at burning calories, getting some muscle endurance, okay, I can live with that. But from a strengthening standpoint, it is not a good strengthening exercise, at least for the legs. So why do the squat
I don't know if I don't know if that particular one is focused on squat. I think it's just more like
then why do the squat if you're not focusing on the squat?
I think it's just range of motion, shoulder, including the core at the same time. I don't know. I don't think that one's for strength. I think that one's would be more for like getting the heart rate up and engaging other muscles.
Well, and I think that kind of goes back to, this whole premise of this article is, again, 9 best exercises to do with 10-pound dumbbells. It's like, well, what's your goal in doing these exercises? And they start the article by saying exercises with dumbbells can amp up your strength once you've mastered the basics of body weight exercises. So the intent here is, from my perspective, strength. And I would say that doing an exercise like that for strength is not necessarily the best approach. If you're doing it for overall muscle endurance, getting a good full body workout, burning calories, great, all for it. I don't think there's any harm in doing that particular movement, but just realize that the whole squatting focus is not going to build as much strength as one might think. I think sometimes we tend to want to see a lot of variety and a lot of kind of fun activity in building strength. And the reality is building strength, is very simple, although the physiological complexity of it and the actual outcome of it is not so simple. I mean, it takes some effort and it takes work, but conceptually, it's very simple. Build strength, you do those 5 basic movements or 7 basic movement patterns and do those in an overload, you're going to build strength. By putting a bunch of exercises out here, this is, I think, attempting to be much more fun and be a more of an aerobic workout as opposed to a strengthening workout. The next exercise is the diagonal raise, which I think overall is a decent exercise. It's essentially doing a deltoid raise, a lateral raise with a fuller range of motion. Most people tend to stop with it right at the sides. I think this exercise is a little bit better performed with a cable machine or bands as opposed to a dumbbell. But
10 pounds is a lot for this movement.
Yeah. And again,
I think 10 pounds is way too much for this movement.
10-pound, any kind of lateral raise for a beginner is probably not a lot of weight. Doesn't take a lot of weight to really hit the deltoids, especially if you're doing them in proper form. A lot of people are trying to crank up way too much weight and they end up with a lot of shoulder damage because they tend to overload the rotator cuff muscles. And by overload, I mean overstress the rotator cuff muscles and not be hitting the deltoids quite the way they should. So
I think 10 pounds is too much for that movement.
Yeah, I would.
I just
would agree
because
as well.
if you're, I mean, good form, you're coming across the body into that fly, like even just me doing the air.
Well, you're kind of weak. So
I'm not that weak. No, I'm not.
I mean, it's obviously dependent on the individual. I mean, for myself, yeah, I think I could do that exercise for strengthening with probably about 15-pound dumbbells and I have shoulder issues because of a type 3 acromion. So
with good form,
I could probably hit 15s pretty well. Start getting above that, the form might start to suffer a little bit. And so a 10-pound dumbbell for many is not going to be necessarily the most ideal. We can kind of quickly look at just run through the list of what the 5 best exercises to do with a 5-pound dumbbell are. They have runner's lunge with overhead circle. Again, you are not really doing much in the way of strength there. Sumo deadlift to sumo squat.
Can we go back to what are you even doing there with the runner's lunge to overhead circle? If with 5 pounds, you're just moving it over your head. Is the goal there just to like loosen up the shoulders? Like, what is is the 5 pound? Are these warm-ups? What would be the focus on that one?
I think theoretically it's a bit more of a core exercise. But again, with a 5-pound dumbbell, you're not doing a whole heck of a lot. It can have some benefit for shoulder mobility. You're getting a little bit of an isometric contraction within that runner's lunge, which is not even a full lunge. So not even full range of motion. Yeah, I don't think it's a great exercise, period. I mean, there are far better ways that you can accomplish what I think might be attempted to be accomplished there. You know, I like the Bulgarian bag spins, for getting a lot of kind of the action that they might be getting within that. And again, it's going to be a little bit heavier in terms of the weight. Any other thoughts on the runner's lunge with overhead circle?
Even the photo on here just angers me.
No, sumo deadlift to sumo squat should be even better. I mean, I would be hard pressed to even the most senior and frail of our listeners should be able to do a 5-pound sumo deadlift to sumo squat. I mean, first of all, a deadlift is using the largest muscle mass of probably any lift that you would do. And so essentially it's like bending over to pick up a 5-pound package off the floor is essentially what you're doing, with a wide stance. And most of us probably don't even do a wide stance. So you're in this wide stance position, you're bending over, and the way they're doing it, the way she's depicting it, and maybe I'm not seeing some images in between, but it really looks like much more of a squat position hip hinge. So you're using the lower back, not really the legs to bring that weight up. You bring the weight up to where it's about waist height out in front of you, and then you squat down.
Yeah. So essentially, if you go into the description, you got your wide legs, you're in your sumo stance, and then it's kind of like a hybrid of a sumo Romanian deadlift. So you're just hinging forward in that wide-legged stance. Then you're slowly coming up. And then again, in that wide-legged sumo stance, you're just squatting down. And then you're coming back up, and then you're hinging forward and then dropping the weight. And again, why?
True.
Realistically, I mean, that combination, when are you ever going to use that combination in real life? Like you're either going to go wide leg, come down and pick it up, or you're just going to squat down and grab it, or you're just going to hinge forward and do it. You're not going to do a hybrid of everything. But if your goal is to do that and add more longevity or strength to your real world scenarios in real world life, why would you just stick with 5 pounds for this exercise? And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm being ignorant. Maybe you don't have access to more than 5 pounds.
Well, that's a whole nother discussion, and we'll talk about that here shortly. But I think the intent of this whole 5 pound workout is really just more of a cardio based, high intensity interval type of workout, more of a calorie burn. But again, what are you really getting out of it? There's far better things that you can do in a workout that's going to be much more time effective and tend to that idea of opportunity cost. If I'm going to go to the gym, I'm not going to be doing 5 pound dumbbells and doing some of these weird movement patterns because they're not going to accomplish a whole heck of a lot. And the next exercise is even worse. It's like the curtsy lunge to weighted standing abduction. Again, it's much more of a motor skill related coordination kind of movement. Might be great for an aerobics type of class, but not really for a true strengthening class. And then we go next to the sumo
that
squat,
one, I think,
alternating overhead press.
With that one, just the movements alone, you really don't even need the 5 pound weight. I feel like that would be just getting in your way, because the only time you should be doing, curtsy lunges or X lunges, whatever you want to call them, and then immediately stand up into an abduction, you're focusing on hip flexibility, balance, and stability. Like a 5 pound weight is just kind of going to throw off. It's
not doing enough, especially with a 5 pound weight. But then the sumo squat, alternating overhead press, I look at that and I see, kettlebell swing might be a lot better for something like that to really get some good hip action in there. And then the last exercise is lying tricep extension to crunch. So essentially, you're just lying on your back, with your legs sticking up in the air. You do a tricep extension, get your arms up in the air, and then you just crunch up a little bit. If you think crunches are a useful exercise, which I'm not a big fan of doing crunches.
I know you're not.
Tricep extensions, but again, you're not using enough weight to, you're using a 5 pound dumbbell, which means you're basically doing 2.5 pounds per tricep.
I would say
hardly any
for that particular one, eliminate the tricep curl, have the weight up above your head, like over the floor, have your feet fully extended out, and then come up into a V crunch. That's what I would say for that particular one, if you're going to be focusing on your core strength.
On your 6-pack abs is essentially what you're doing.
Yeah, but I'm not going to, that's almost counterproductive to have your legs straight up in the air, do a tricep curl, and then come straight up and do a toe touch. There's too much rest and not enough stress on your abs or on your tricep. Like there's really no benefit on doing a combination of those two.
Yeah. And then the next one is a figure 8 crunch, which is kind of along the same vein. Then we get into the weighted donkey kick. 5 pound dumbbell added to your donkey kick is hardly going to do anything. That's like you're adding 5 pounds to the weight of your leg and doing a hip extension exercise.
And just so our listener, 5 pounds could be anything. If you put 5 pounds on as an ankle weight and you're changing the torque difference on the hinge, that could make it but how this particular one is demonstrated, she has the 5 pound dumbbell right behind her knee, and as she's extending up, and that's where I agree with you. If that's the placement of it, 5 pounds is not going to do anything. No. You're almost not even going to feel the difference.
Yeah, there's not going to be a huge difference in there.
If
And
anything, it's going to prevent you from getting a full range of motion because you're going to be so focused on not the actual kickback to get that full contraction in the glute. You're going to be focused so much on, I got to keep my knee holding on to the, right? You're not going to get the.
And I think, if you're looking at putting these exercises together in, say, a 20-minute HIIT workout, then, okay, that it might not be so bad. But again, having added some progression with the weight would be useful. Maybe incorporating bands as opposed to using the dumbbells could be useful. But from a strengthening standpoint, the capacity of being able to progressively overload this is almost non-existent. And they're talking about doing 2 sets of 12 repetitions of each of these. You're not building strength. You're not even building muscle endurance for that standpoint because you're not putting enough overload to really consider it being an overload to both, or overload to the muscle per se. So we've gone through these 3 articles, and we will certainly put links to them in the discussion notes or the episode notes. But there's more that we can kind of unwrap within this. I mean, the whole idea of just a 10-pound dumbbell, it implies that, to really start down the journey of your fitness program, just go to Dick's and buy yourself a set of 10-pound dumbbells and do these workouts, and you're going to get fit. What do you think about that?
I think that's a lie. I think going out to Dick's, buying a 10-pound dumbbell, I think, congratulations. You've just took your first step to a workout regimen, right? You're taking that first baby step. You got weights, but
you have 2 weights.
You got 2 weights,
and they're the same weight.
2 10-pound dumbbells, but eventually that's not going to be enough. You cannot settle when you're on this fitness journey, right? And you have to have a good goal in mind. Is your goal going to be, I just want to increase muscle endurance, stamina? Well, then, 10 pounds for a HIIT training is going to be awesome. But are you wanting to tone? Are you wanting to add strength? Are you wanting to add that longevity? Are you wanting to do a 5 by 5 pound, or are you wanting to do a 5 by 5 program? 10 pounds is not going to be enough. It's a good start if you've never been active, right? It's good.
Technically, with the 5 by 5, 10 pounds would be way below the typical starting point. The exercise they do, usually, you're starting with about a 45-pound bar, and then you're adding anywhere from 5 to 10 pounds per workout to progress that. And in most strength workouts, that's probably about where your starting point is going to be. If you are much weaker than that, then some of those exercises you might need to go to, either lighter dumbbells or a lighter bar. But a standard Olympic bar is going to be about 45 pounds. So that's at the much, much lower level of overload to begin to progress the muscle. And you're going to adapt very quickly to that. I mean, if you're able to do a 10-pound dumbbell and you've mastered the technique, now you're not going to see any more adaptation until you start adding more resistance to that. And that brings us to then, well, what do we do? If you're limited on funding, limited on space, you're going to do a home workout, where do we start? And can we start doing a whole body type of workout with just dumbbells? And I say, yeah, you can, but you need that capacity to progressively overload it. And that brings you to, okay, well, if we go fixed weight dumbbells, it gets very expensive to start getting that progression. And I've bought my 10-pound dumbbells. I've outgrown them. Now I buy some 12-pound dumbbells. I outgrow those. And then progressively, I'm having all these dumbbells are just kind of sitting off to the side because I never use them. You go to 15 pounds, 20 pounds, and they go up in 5-pound increments. That can get rather expensive. And usually my recommendation is to get an adjustable set of dumbbells and then begin to buy, the plates that would go for them. So start with 5-pound weights, some 10-pound weights, and then you can adjust the weight in rather small increments. And I've done that in my gym. I have I think I forget how many sets of adjustable dumbbells. They either kind of just have this spin caps on them. So you just screw them on tight rather than having to use the clips, because I don't like the clips if you're going to be moving to where, the weight is going to be putting load against those clips, because they can dump out pretty easily if those clips aren't really, really tight. But I can go anywhere from, with the setup I have, I could probably go anywhere from about, well, empty bar, I think those are probably about 4 pounds usually, maybe 5 pounds if you look at just the empty bar. So say it goes from 5 pounds up to probably put at least 200 pounds on my longest set of dumbbells. So it allows me quite a bit of flexibility for rather little money.
Well, that's interesting that you're talking about adjusting like adjustable weights. I think you actually with that Livestrong email that you sent me, I think there was another link in there on like a new adjustable weight product.
Yeah, it's a product I came across. And again, we are not being asked to review this product or being compensated for reviewing it. And so
what? We're not being compensated.
Yeah, we're not being compensated for anything. If somebody would want to compensate us, I'm more than happy to. But I just like to give a really honest review of this particular product, because I like it conceptually. The product is called Adjustable, and we'll have the link to it. I'm not quite sure how to pronounce the company name. I think it's Kensui. They have a bunch of other products, many of which seem pretty reasonable. But this is Adjustable is a dumbbell that, rather than the weight slipping on and you just screw the caps on the ends and you have these remaining kind of bit of dumbbell sticking out that can scrape the legs. I know for myself, when I do like bench press or something like that, and you're doing heavy and you drop it kind of onto your thighs to be able to get back up and get that down on the floor without throwing them down onto the ground. There's been a number of times I've kind of really scraped up my thigh pretty well by bringing it down and just catching the end of that dumbbell on the leg. And it's not the most comfortable. It takes a little bit more control to be able to do that. The idea of the Adjustable is that the ends screw into the handle, and so you can put the weights on there, and they essentially become like your fixed dumbbells that you might have on your, you might see in certain gyms and things like that. And so it's kind of nice in concept, but it holds up to 70 pounds. But the way it's set up, to get 70 pounds on there, you need 2 25-pound plates and 2 10-pound plates. And that's what fits.
That
means
adds up to 70.
Yeah, I could do my math. But that also means that I'm limited in those upper weights to, I could put the 225s on and get 50 pounds. That'll screw up tight. I can put on, I guess, another 2.5. So that would bring me up to 55 pounds. I can then put another 5 on each side, gets me at 60. But then you get to 60, I guess you can go 62 up to, so you get smaller increments in there, I guess, that, but it becomes a little bit more difficult to have much more refined. So you have, like, say I go let's go 52. I know this is really sounding very bad right now. Put 2.5s on each side. So that puts me at 55. I can't go another 2.5 up on those because they won't fit, so I can't put it at like 57 pounds. I can go up from 55 to 60, and then I can go at 60. I have the 2 25s on there, 2 5s. There's not going to be more space, I'm assuming, there may be, to be able to squeeze another 2.5 on there to get it up to 65 pounds. So that means that quite possibly, and again, I haven't really had these physically in person to see, but I'm guessing that it's going to be a little bit more difficult to go from 60 to 65 to 70. You're going to kind of miss that 5-pound increment in there, which can be very critical in terms of progressive overload. And then you can't go beyond 70. And so that really limits what you can do with it, particularly if you're doing dumbbell rows or something like that. You get into your smaller weights, you're going to run into some adjustment difficulties in terms of how many plates you can get on there to get to the weight that you need. Like I'm assuming, 20 below 25, you'd have like 210s. That's going to fit pretty good. But you get down to like 15, you got a 10, a 5. You can't put another weight in there for another smaller increment. So your increments can be off just a bit. They do offer an extender to that, which allows you, I think it's an additional, I believe it's about 2.5 inches, about 2 inches on the end, which means you can add an additional 2 plates. So you could probably get easily like 150 pounds on that, which for many people, that's going to be sufficient. But my fear is that as you add more weight and you extend that out further, you have less threaded material going into the handle that is going to be making it a little less safe and stable. Somebody might cram a lot of weight on the end of that and only screw in enough that it loosens up a little bit and it falls apart on you while you're doing your bench press or something like that. So I actually prefer to just simply buy. And you go on Amazon, you can find a lot of different manufacturers for this kind of screw end dumbbells, and they're varying lengths. And you get the length that's going to fit the amount of weight that you need on there with minimal amount of excess on the ends. And those can get pretty long. I think the last set I got was about 18 inches, and that can load up pretty heavy. And so that would be my kind of recommendation with those. Although, I think for many this adjustable would be a very good option. They are reasonably priced to get just the basic. It's $47 on sale. So right now it's $49, a couple dollars off. Oh, that's
You'd think we'd be sponsored by this, but we're not.
Yeah, that is the extension. The adjustable itself is $47. That's actually a fairly reasonable price drop. It's it's $20 off. But it's another $47 to get the extensions just seems quite expensive to me. If I were the company, I would be offering multiple size adjustable. So you can buy, rather than having to pay so much for an extension, you buy an adjustable that has, it's say 100-pound capacity, 150-pound capacity, and those are set up in a way that are going to be much more stable and a little bit more economical. So you have a bit of a range in there, so that basic adjustable could be anywhere from, say, 10 pounds up to 70 pounds in reasonable increments. And you have one that goes from maybe 70 to 100 to 150, and that would work a little bit better. But the nice thing with an adjustable dumbbell is you don't have to go out and buy all the weight at once. As you get stronger, you add a few more plates. And eventually, you have a pretty good stock of plates on there, and you're using them because you've gotten stronger, right? So you start off doing that 10 pounds, and all you need are 5s on each side of the dumbbell. That actually would be a little bit more than that. So it's probably about 2.5 on each side to get a 10-pound dumbbell. Build up to that. You get a couple 5 pounds, add those on, get a 10-pound, and it's a lot less expensive than a gym membership over time.
I don't know how we got here. We were talking about exercise and everything, and then we dove into this product. And
well, I think what we're really trying to convey here, hopefully to the listeners that have endured this podcast for as long as we have been talking today, I think what we're getting at is that in order for a program to be effective, it has to first meet the goals of the individual. So we have that continuum from cardiorespiratory to muscle endurance to muscle strength. What are you trying to accomplish? If you're trying to accomplish strength, you need heavy loads for few repetitions.
Mm-hmm.
And some of those exercises that we described are not hitting strength in the purest sense. They're not necessarily bad exercises of themselves, but they're hitting a different goal. And
I don't know. I think that 5 pound swinging,
well, yeah,
rotating around your head is pretty
article,
bad.
I would just kind of skip over reading that altogether. Unless you're maybe an aerobics instructor and you're just kind of looking for some new movements to do in a class, that would be different.
And again, if you're doing a HIIT training, it might be good as a rest exercise for you to catch your breath. But like, other than that, it's really not doing anything else.
But if you're doing a true HIIT program, rest should be just that rest, So you're stopping the exercise, you're catching your breath, you're not doing anything, and then you jump into that next 45 seconds or whatever it might be. So there needs to be that specificity. We also need to accomplish the principle of progressive overload. Overload is basically that in order for a body system to adapt, it has to be stressed to a level greater than that to which it is accustomed. So whether we're doing it for cardio, whether we're doing it for muscle endurance, whether we're doing it for strength, we have to overload those systems. And so if you're using a 10-pound dumbbell and you're doing it for more of a HIIT workout for cardio and burning fat, overload is going to dictate that your number of repetitions has to go up. And eventually that gets to, 100-pound or 10-pound curls for 10 minutes to do cardio. There's, again, far better ways to accomplish your cardio. When muscle endurance, again, you're going to hit a certain limit of those repetitions, you're going to have to start adding weight. And muscle strength, you're basically adding weight all the time. And so you need some way of progressing that overload so that you're getting the adaptations that you want. And, for these workouts that, we've kind of gone through, those may be good complements to cardio, your normal cardio, going out and running or biking, whatever you might do for cardio, or your strengthening workouts where you're building pure strength. And maybe your goal is to just improve your body composition. Just realize that 10-pound dumbbells with no progression, you're not adding muscle mass. You're basically elevating your daily caloric expenditure. You're limited in how many more calories you're burning. So you're going to burn some fat as long as you are in a caloric deficit. So doing these workouts and then increasing your food intake is not going to benefit you. Whereas if you're doing strengthening exercises where you're doing a significant amount of load on the muscles, so much more than those 10-pound dumbbells, you can actually increase your caloric intake to be able to do more work, build more muscle, and you're actually maybe going to improve your body composition more effectively, even though you might not lose weight on the scale. So what is our goal? Is it to simply lose body fat? I think doing cardio is probably some better ways of doing that. HIIT workouts are going to burn a little bit more fat, maybe help maintain your muscle mass a little bit more effectively. Strengthening exercise, depending on your caloric intake and expenditure, may or may not necessarily lose body fat, but you are going to increase your muscle mass, which is going to make you overall more functional, make you able to eat more and burn more calories. That's one thing I like about strength over cardio is if I want to lose weight doing just cardio, I have to also restrict my caloric intake. I don't get to eat as much. I've got to burn a boatload of calories. If I do strengthening exercises, I can kind of maintain some of that food intake that I'm doing because a lot more of that's going into fueling the muscle recovery and repair and growth. I can enjoy food and I can still get leaner. And I'm going to be able to probably have a little bit longer functional life because I have more muscle mass to be able to enjoy the things that I like to do. What do you think?
Marathon runners are pretty skinny though.
Because marathon running, you're burning a lot of fat. So you see very few, and we're talking kind of in the more elite end, you see very few.
But I feel like they're eating because they're trying to take in more
how many calories you're burning in those runs. If we follow the 100 kilocalorie rule, for every mile, whether you walk, jog, or run, you're expending roughly about 100 kilocalories. Average size runner, that's pretty significant. A bigger runner is probably going to burn a little bit more, but they also might not be running as far or as fast. A lighter runner might burn a little bit less, but generally, as a rule of thumb, you could think of 100 kilocalories. So if you're running 5 miles a day, that's 500 calories right there that you need to include above and beyond your resting basal metabolic rate in order to maintain your body weight. And so if somebody has been eating, a certain diet and decides to start just simply walking, running, or jogging 5 miles a day, they're going to burn 500 kilocalories. They're going to lose a pound of fat a week simply because they have maintained their caloric intake, but they have increased their caloric expenditure by 500 kilocalories. You reduce your calories as in addition to the increased expenditure, you're going to lose weight a little bit faster, right? But from a physiological standpoint, the endurance type of activities do not stimulate muscle hypertrophy. In fact, they do quite the opposite, to where we're trying to make the body more efficient. And so the goal is efficiency. And if we are carrying more weight, it's harder to run. And so running, particularly, any kind of cardio that is much more impactive, is going to be a bit more detrimental to your muscle mass. Or at least you'll see a shift in the type of muscle mass because you're going to use more type 1 muscle fibers because they are less dense. They're a bit more fuel efficient. And
that's what I would love to do, a podcast on muscle fibers.
We can do that coming up. Yeah, we'll have to talk a little bit about.
Love to do one.
And I think we had that kind of listed as a topic to do, talking about kind of the physiology of growing muscle. Maybe we can do that for our next podcast. But I think you really have to go back to that principle of specificity and the principle of overload as you are considering, what equipment do I need for my workout goals? What am I doing to accomplish those goals? And more than likely, if you're not accomplishing your goals, you're not doing the right activity. Or in some cases, you just might not be genetically predisposed to that. We have responders and non-responders in basically all categories of exercise. And, you might just be attempting the wrong goals to, in what you're doing. And so, like for myself, I can lift all I want. I'm not going to get huge. My son is a little bit different. He chose his parents more wisely, I guess, than I chose mine. And, he can grow his legs and some of his muscles much more effectively than me. I can still lift more than him in some capacities, but he's bigger than me in some of those. His legs are like tree trunks. Mine are like chicken legs, and I can squat more than him. So doesn't mean I give up on lifting because I'm not going to get big. It just means, if I had any aspiration of being a bodybuilder, power lifter, those were dead at the moment of conception. But I'm still getting health benefits out of doing that particular activity. And so we shouldn't necessarily neglect. Like, I'll never be a marathon runner either, but that doesn't mean I can't improve my VO2 max. And so look at the goals that you are trying to accomplish. Do I have the equipment necessary to do that? If I don't have the equipment, what do I need to be able to progress toward those goals? And, we've been talking dumbbell workouts today. I think dumbbells are great. You can do it. There's a lot of versatility with them. But you're going to want to consider having either a variety of fixed weight dumbbells in order to adequately overload, say, your legs when you're doing a squatting exercise. A goblet squat is great, but you're not going to get a lot out of a goblet squat doing 10-pound goblet squats for very long. Your first week of doing those 10 pounds might be sufficient to really feel an overload as you're building up the technique. But I can guarantee within a week, no matter who you are, 10-pound goblet squats are going to require that you add a little bit more weight. And so how am I going to accomplish the addition of that weight? Am I going to buy a big elaborate set of 5 to 70 to 80 to 100-pound dumbbells that are all fixed weight? That's going to cost you thousands of dollars. And in that case, I would recommend just buying an Olympic barbell set and a good rack, and it would be cheaper in the long run. But if you're fixed on doing dumbbells, look at, a reasonable set of adjustable dumbbells. Get shorter ones to start, get some longer ones that are going to hold the weight, and have that variety of lengths so that, you're not loading 10 pounds on an 18-inch, adjustable dumbbell so that you have this, sharp spear on either end of the dumbbell, and it's going to limit your range of motion. You're doing hammer curls and you risk poking your eye out because the dumbbell is too long. You want the appropriate length of dumbbell, but they're not that expensive. And they're going to be cheaper in the long run than buying a, fixed dumbbell weights.
So moral of the story is know your goal and have that guide you, I think is what I'm getting of the overall summary of it.
Let your goals lead you to aging well.
There we go. Perfect.
Thank you for listening. I hope you benefited from today's podcast. And until next time, keep aging well.